Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. Boris Dizenghausen is here with you. Today is May 26th. There are a lot of interesting news stories in this episode. So Trump stated that Putin has completely lost his mind, but gave a rather strange answer regarding sanctions. For the third night in a row, Ukraine is under heavy missile and drone attacks. Meanwhile, in Europe and the US, a number of very harsh statements have been made calling for Putin to be punished. Today, Ukrainian drones have hit some extremely interesting targets. And as for Medvedev, over the weekend he has already conquered all of Ukraine. All this and more in today's episode. If this is your first time on this channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. So let's get into it. So Donald Trump has stated that Putin has completely lost his mind, bombarding Ukraine with missiles and drones. But Putin couldn't care less about Trump's outrage, and for the third night in a row is relentlessly bombarding Ukraine with cruise missiles, drones, and ballistic missiles. Moreover, right after Trump's statement, Putin once again launched missiles and deployed strategic aviation. Basically, he couldn't care less about what Trump has to say. And unfortunately, each time he sets new negative records. Today, 355 drones were launched at Ukraine. And then there's this, the old school. Do you remember the entity in the form of a gnome? So this entity in the form of a gnome, I'm talking about Medvedev, is now threatening to capture all of Ukraine. He published a video showing what the buffer zone might look like if military aid to Ukraine continues. So he published the video to make it easier so he wouldn't get banned for copyright. Basically, according to him, almost all of Ukraine is a buffer zone, except for a small, narrow area in the west. Specifically, this region, in his opinion, will remain Ukraine, and all the rest will become a buffer zone. I've already lost count of how many times Medvedev has taken Ukraine. I know for sure that every evening he probably takes Finland, maybe not just one bottle, but as for Ukraine, he's already taken it countless times. And here, Medvedev has shown this. It's the absolute truth about how they originally saw things. So originally, of course, they wanted to annex it, but now Ukraine's very existence irritates these Kremlin dwarfs so much that, well, I think it's almost impossible to put it into words. Especially Ukraine, which will go down in history as the one that slapped Putin in the face. Ukraine, which Putin will choke on, and basically, that's where his career as a conqueror will end. Earlier, Putin, I'd like to remind you, stated that he had supposedly given an order to create a buffer zone if military aid to Ukraine had really continued in the necessary amounts. And some people, let's be honest, now I'm not talking about Merz, but about the previous chancellor. If some people hadn't been shyly hiding their Tauruses in the corner, then Medvedev would be writing his posts about a buffer zone from at least beyond the Ural Mountains. I think that the mama's little threat maker would definitely be sitting there. Oh, and even decent people in the US can't stand watching how their country's leadership tries to tiptoe around things, pretending not to see, not to notice, not to hear, like, I didn't say that, and so on. By the way, the U.S. Special Representative for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, was the first among American administration officials to respond to the consequences of the massive strikes on Ukraine. First of all, he called it a violation of the Geneva Protocols. He posted a photo and wrote, "This is Kiev. The indiscriminate killing of women and children at night in their homes is a violation of the 1977 Geneva Protocols, which are intended to protect innocent people." Well, thanks to Keith Kellogg, of course. He really did the right thing. It feels like if it weren't for Keith Kellogg and if it weren't for Rubio, who also raises the issue of sanctions, and if it weren't for Lindsey Graham, then apart from golf and, I don't know, some pleasant topics, no one would talk about anything at all. Not just Keith Kellogg. A lot of people were outraged. By the way, lately there have been a lot of foreigners in Kiev, meaning delegations of various levels, different programs. I think they all see what's happening, and there are many correspondents and news bureaus, and they're reporting back with the necessary emphasis. Because, well, especially these past 3 days, And it's not even just these 3 days. This kind of hell in the frontline cities has been going on practically since the very beginning of the full-scale invasion. So just imagine, for example, you have the standard air raid alert app that many Ukrainians use, where you check or you read Telegram channels to see what's flying, where it's flying, and how it's flying. So this app is constantly on, your region is marked in red, and the alert almost never turns off. And not only that, but what's the purpose of this app? It's so that, okay, there's a threat. For example, a Tu-95 bomber takes off like it did that night, and missiles are launched. So if they're launched from there, it means they'll arrive in 2 hours. If from here, then in 3 hours. In other words, the app gives you the chance to hide, to go down into the subway or a shelter. But in frontline cities, what does it say? That's it, just a few seconds and it hits. Ballistic missiles, just a few seconds and they arrive. So even if you really wanted to, you can't get down to a shelter with your children. You just won't make it in time. You understand? And it's the same thing here, by the way. Sometimes a ballistic missile takes just a few seconds. Boom, boom, and it starts. That's exactly what Putin is doing to Ukraine. And well, this just shouldn't be happening. After these massive shellings, I go on social media and read posts from people I know. Young guys and girls write, "Today I was lying there," or "I'm lying here now thinking that's it. I've come to terms with the fact that I might die here because it was so loud, so close to us," and so on. These are young, healthy people writing things like this. Well, because there's nothing you can do, it's just buzzing right above you. The Shahed drone, when it starts screeching, that means it's diving. So where can you go? Are you going to jump out of the way? Are you going to fall through the ground or not? So it's not just Kit Kellogg. I don't know. I've probably wanted to talk about this for a long time. And yes, and about those who are in the frontline cities. There are just seconds and then it hits and entire apartment blocks collapse. There you have it, this Kremlin bastard. That's what he's doing. And absolutely, what does he want? He wants 4 regions. He wants a piece of land. You're looking the wrong way. Look over there, where Medvedev is supposed to be sitting beyond the Ural Mountains. Look in that direction, at your own territories. Another congressman, a Republican, I want to emphasize, that's important. So both Keith Kellogg, who is from Donald Trump's team, and Don Bacon, who is, well, from the Republican Party, Trump's fellow party member, stated the following: Ukraine needs to be armed to the teeth. The toughest possible sanctions should be imposed on Russia, and 300 billion of its frozen assets should be confiscated. He is commenting specifically on the consequences of the attack. It's time to be honest. Peace talks have zero effect on Putin. His goal is to dominate Ukraine, and he won't stop until he realizes he can't win. That's absolutely right. This same alco-hobbit, he's the one who constantly posts maps or writes that Ukraine doesn't exist. That's what it will all look like. They're just shouting at you. We want everything. And what about Trump? What do you think? Despite this statement, in fact, what he wrote on his social media, he dodged the question about sanctions. Well, that's very predictable. Yesterday, or rather over the weekend, Donald Trump didn't bother himself with these unpleasant questions. He posted a photo where Steve Witkoff, who likes to fly to see Putin, was attacked by a swan on a golf course. So Witkoff is fending it off, his golf club is off to one side, and so on. Honestly, I felt sorry for the swan in that situation. Well, why not, right? By the way, Witkoff is a longtime friend of Trump, a business partner, and also a billionaire. They love playing golf together. So what's going on there? Putin is launching hundreds and hundreds of missiles and drones into Ukraine. And as for Steve Witkoff, a swan attacked him. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Let more people know the truth. And now we've come to this important statement from Donald Trump. Putin, he basically packed everything into his message. He criticized not only Putin, but also Zelensky. And of course, as always, Biden got his share too. So why is this important? There are some extremely interesting turns of phrase in this statement that I'd like us to pay attention to. I'm quoting in full what Donald Trump wrote. "I have always had very good relations with Vladimir Putin of Russia, but something happened to him. He's completely lost his mind." Well, here I would translate it as gone crazy. He is senselessly killing a lot of people. And I'm not just talking about soldiers. Missiles and drones are being launched at Ukrainian cities for no reason at all. I have always said that he wants all of Ukraine, not just a part of it, and maybe that's turning out to be true. But if he actually achieves this, it will lead to the downfall of Russia. At the same time, continuing the quote, President Zelensky is not helping his country at all by saying things like that, or by saying what he says. Everything he says causes problems. I don't like it, and it needs to stop. How? What? Zelensky should stop talking, or, well, probably stop criticizing Putin. This war, which, without this paragraph, it wouldn't be a Donald Trump post. This war, which never would have started if I had been president. This is Zelensky's, Putin's, and Biden's war, not Trump's. I am only trying to put out the big and ugly fires that were ignited because of blatant incompetence and hatred. When asked what he would do about it, whether he would impose sanctions, Trump did not give a direct answer and accused the journalists of spreading fake news. So, we'll see what we're going to do. What can I tell you? You're fake news, aren't you? You're completely fake. Any more questions? That's how Donald Trump responded. So something happened to Putin, right? Something happened to him. He had never before attacked Ukraine with missiles and drones. But in the last 3 days, all of a sudden, he just started doing it out of nowhere. Now, in Western media, there is a growing campaign calling on Trump to really hit the Putin economy hard and to continue military aid. This part I really liked. I would like us to pay attention to it. I have always said that he wants all of Ukraine, not just a part of it, and maybe that turns out to be true. So that means he can't have all of Ukraine, right? But a part is okay. But if Donald Trump says, I have always said, always known that Putin wants all of Ukraine, then what was the point of all those stories about ending the war in 24 hours, in 100 days, and so on? This means it was already clear that at every negotiation platform, from Saudi Arabia to Turkey, Putin was sending delegations just to lie and stall for time. And he continues to do this. And yes, this. Has Putin suddenly gone mad? Look, he has always been this way. He has always been this way. Nemtsov described him very accurately. From a lackey, Sobchak's bag carrier, he grew into a vile, spiteful, yet cowardly tyrant with this maniacal desire to go down in history. He has always done his dirty work through others. Always. And he would only admit it when he was already sure that there wouldn't be any serious consequences for what he had done. He attacked Georgia when Medvedev was president of the Russian Federation, when Medvedev, that temporary stand-in, that Putin prototype, took the post of president. And if anything went wrong, of course, the sanctions would have fallen on Medvedev. But it worked out, and he started making further plans. I remember those stories when Medvedev would say, I made the decision myself. But then retired Russian generals would tell how the plan had been developed long before that, and that Putin was calling Medvedev. Naturally, I mean, Medvedev and independence, those are worlds apart. He'll be allowed to write a post, that's about it. By the way, back then I looked into the statistics. At that time, only 8% of Russians actually thought that Medvedev was really running the country. Well, at the beginning, when he became president, that's his role in history. Diamond, the 8% man. Fat-free Diamond. No, 8 is like that, fat. It's actually strange that there were even those 8% who thought Medvedev was running the country. And here an interesting piece of news came up. India's Ministry of Foreign Affairs decided to play a little trick on Donald Trump and stated that Trump had nothing to do with the ceasefire agreement between India and Pakistan. Even though Washington made some calls for de-escalation, they're saying here that Trump tried to take credit for it. In reality, only India and Pakistan were involved. So there was no peacemaking here. But Trump declared in his usual manner, I am absolutely considering the possibility of tightening sanctions against Russia. As for the idea that, Trump will still show what he's capable of, don't be too quick to criticize him. I think I read the comments. I think you've seen those comments too. These are absolutely real people writing, and they, just like me, have the right to their own point of view. That's all. That's absolutely right. But I always, well, at least today, I'd like to offer a bit of a counterpoint to them. That is, every day until the moment when Trump finally shows, but still hasn't shown, every one of those days means the deaths of civilians, children in Ukraine, the deaths of our soldiers, cities wiped off the face of the earth. So every day that he could show, but doesn't, and by the way, Donald Trump himself always emphasizes the large number of deaths. If he can already show it now, well, he can. The sanctions package is ready. Lindsey Graham is just waiting for the signal. Why isn't he doing it? If Putin has revealed to him, to use Donald Trump's own words, all his cards saying he wants all of Ukraine, that he thinks he will win, then why isn't Trump taking action? He's agreeing with this. He's giving Putin more time. I can't find answers to these questions. I mean, obviously it's one thing to just criticize, but I want to ask if there are any admirers or supporters of Donald Trump's policies here, especially those who also sympathize with Ukraine. I'd like to hear an answer to at least one of these questions. Oh, and one more thing along those lines. Why is it that sanctions can be imposed on partners, neighbors, and NATO allies at the snap of a finger, but not on Russia? And by the way, to be fair, I want to say that I'll be the first to sincerely applaud Donald Trump if he actually imposes real sanctions on the Kremlin and forces Putin to end this war. For now, unfortunately, we are still very far from that. Although tomorrow, who knows, maybe a swan will attack, or some black swan or one of another color will show up, like the one that bit Witkoff, and something will happen. But right now, everything rests on the shoulders of our soldiers. So, friends, let me remind you that we have an important fundraiser for the Freedom of Russia Legion, a major campaign to provide drones and equipment for assault and reconnaissance units. The Legion is stationed in the hottest areas and continues to defend our land and all of us. Let's help them. Oh, and the link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. There you'll also find the Legion's bank card number, as well as a PayPal option for those who want to help from abroad. Everything truly rests on the shoulders of our soldiers. The more we help them, the more opportunities they have to destroy the Russians, and the greater the chance that they will return home safe and sound. That's why I'm asking you to support the fundraiser. If you're not watching on my channel, here's a QR code. It goes directly to the Legion's bank. And here's an example of proper communication. I mentioned earlier today that there would be a lot of good, proper statements. I would like to see actions follow those statements. An example of proper communication. First of all, we need to amplify to cosmic proportions the fact that Trump is already calling Putin crazy. Peskov has already tried to respond somehow, saying it was just an emotional outburst. But believe me, the Baldysaurus really didn't like being called insane in the Kremlin. And secondly, every new shelling of Ukraine should be presented as a personal challenge from Putin to Trump, which is exactly what the German foreign minister did. And Johann Wadefull responded to the massive air attacks. He wrote that Putin is trampling on human rights. This is a challenge, including to the President of the United States, Donald Trump. According to him, the White House really made serious efforts to bring Putin to the negotiating table, but in response received such a dismissive escalation. And this is the reaction. It is clear that Putin does not want peace. He wants to continue the war. We must not allow him to do this. Therefore, the minister says that Europe should hit Putin even harder with sanctions and prepare new ones. There will be a tough response from the West, and we would like to see a tough response from the United States as well. And there is also a positive statement from Germany. Norbert Röttgen, deputy chairman of the leading CDU-CSU parliamentary faction, in an interview with Welt, he said that 250 billion in Russian state assets should be confiscated and used for Ukraine's needs right now. Well, in general, and you know this fear, this second statement today, go ahead and seize Russian assets. I can guarantee you this will definitely shake up some people in the Kremlin. And immediately you hear the argument from these hidden devil's advocates. Yes, these hidden advocates for Putin, they say, well, this will scare off investors. And the respected politician responds to you that this will only scare off those investors who are planning a war of aggression and intend to use these assets, but still keep their assets in European depositories. So for those who are planning wars, they need to look for other ways, like stashing their money in a piggy bank, or, like Assad, transporting it by plane. Well, people have been saying for a long time that it's time to seize these assets and use them for Ukraine's needs. And why are they afraid? Do you know why? Because no one really knows how much dictators' money is stored in European depositories. Oh dear, this would really only scare off those who have reason to worry about these assets. Maybe because they weren't acquired honestly, or maybe because they might be confiscated for international crimes. Criminal syndicates won't keep their money in European depositories. That's what will happen. And now Putin is starting to escalate the situation in the Baltic Sea. He's worried about the tankers of his shadow fleet in the narrow part of the Gulf of Finland, and, let me remind you, has repeatedly violated the airspace of NATO countries and is now essentially escorting his tankers by sending out aircraft. In other words, he's escalating the situation. He's very afraid, which means he's very worried that the tankers will stop transporting his oil. Especially now, with prices falling, this would be a major blow for him. And this is causing concern. And let me remind you, Russia has already violated the airspace there several times. At the end of last year, there were several acts of sabotage on the floor of the Baltic Sea all at once. Yes, later they wrote that supposedly some tankers accidentally dropped anchor and dragged them for 100 miles along the seabed, and then snagged those cables. Communication cables got caught. But how is it, when I did a program about this, people who actually understand these things came and said, you'd have to be crazy not to realize that an anchor is being dragged for 100 miles. It affects everything. So, the fact that these cables were being cut, including by Russian crews on purpose, I think there's no doubt about that. And it just so happened, purely by coincidence, that all of this started right after the Maritime Board was created under Patrushev. He became the head of this Maritime Board. And the goal of this Maritime Board is to ensure Russia's dominance and to strengthen its influence in the seas and oceans. Basically, Putin only understands force. By the way, he's also terribly afraid for his own life. And I also think that the emergence of new information about his family or close circle is extremely, extremely painful for him. About the Kabayats, or Kabayonish, if you will. Recently, a series of programs came out. He is very, very upset about this, I think. Most likely, he simply considers his family a vulnerable spot, because in the KGB, they were taught very well how to break resistance, including through loved ones and family. And so Putin keeps launching missiles, drones, but Ukraine just won't surrender. Medvedev is furious, but Ukraine still won't surrender. And on top of that, it strikes back by launching drones. Today, drones once again reached Alabuga. That's a special economic zone in Tatarstan, where Alabuga Polytechnic is located. And students there assemble drones with their own hands. There's a dormitory there, And basically, they've created a miniature version of Russia there. And really, the decision to stain these 16 and 17-year-old students with this kind of blood is a classic example of Putin's policy. Like, they may not have fought in the war, but they assembled the Shahed drones, yes, the ones that flew to Ukraine. It's a move that's brilliant in its vileness, because later on someone might ask, where are the lists of those who assembled the Shaheds in Alabuga? Who are these people? Let's take a look at them. By the way, they're expanding their capacity there and increasing recruitment from poor countries, luring people in with promises of Russian citizenship, career advancement, and other incentives. In reality, students from poor countries come and assemble these drones. And I read the comments there. Honestly, that polytechnic has basically created a miniature totalitarian state. And I'm focusing on this polytechnic not just because drones hit it today, or because they're planning to expand their capacity and produce even more Shaheds, but because it represents the model for the entire future Russian state. It's a huge, Alabuga. Russia is a giant Alabuga where everyone, young and old, is assembling drones. Where the guards, maybe not in wooden watchtowers, but sitting in glass offices in Moscow City, keep an eye on everyone. Well, and drones also struck a chemical plant in the Ivanovo region, and the Tula region got hit today as well. And finally, there's one more thing I'd like to mention. Today, or rather yesterday, the head of the Foreign Intelligence Service, Oleg Ivashchenko, shared some interesting information. He talked a lot about Russia's mobilization potential and said that by the end of this year we can expect serious problems in the Russian economy. In other words, they're already running military overspending of about $5 billion. He also said that there is neither nuclear weapons nor the Oreshnik complex in Belarus, but we already knew that, didn't we? We knew that all along. A bonus question for Lukashenko. What was the point of all this? Why did you stale Draniki get yourself into this adventure, and you'll have to answer for it? I don't know, maybe there are some Lukashenko fans here, maybe you'll answer for him in the comments. But friends, take care of yourselves and your loved ones. If possible, please support the fundraiser for the Legion. Wishing us all a peaceful day, and of course, glory to Ukraine.